You've been lied to. You've been told that if you follow the system, if you just go with the flow, follow your heart, take deep breaths, scroll enough, consume enough, numb enough, you'll find peace. But the system was never meant to heal you. It can't. It's broken, and worse, it was built broken. It was crafted by a world out of alignment with its creator, a world trying to replace God with gods made in its own image. You were not created for this system. You were not made to survive in a machine of anxiety, confusion, and artificial hope. The system will teach you to suppress your pain, mask your sorrow, smile through torment, and medicate your soul with distractions. But the truth is, what the system offers is not healing, it's hiding. God never called you to hide. He called you to overcome. You're not failing because you're broken. You're not overwhelmed because you're weak. You're not stuck in fear because you lack motivation. You are here because the system failed you. It fed your mind but starved your spirit. It spoke to your emotions but silenced your soul. It gave you a mirror but took away the truth of your reflection. It gave you words but stole the word. And God says today, come out of it, step out of Babylon, walk out of Egypt, break the chains that were dressed up in comfort. They told you that negative feelings were signs of dysfunction. But what if they're signals? What if your sorrow is not a defect, but a divine alarm? What if your depression is the cry of your spirit longing for something real, something eternal, something not built by man, but breathed by God? The world tells you to get over it. God tells you to go through it with Him. The world says numb the pain. God says redeem the pain. The world gives you coping strategies. God gives you freedom. Not just temporary relief, not a moment of silence in a sea of noise, but shalom, peace that passes understanding. You see, the system cannot fix what it didn't create. It can't mend what it doesn't understand. Your soul wasn't engineered in a lab. It was knit together in your mother's womb by the hands of a holy God. That's why nothing in this world fully satisfies. That's why the more you feed your flesh, the hungrier your soul becomes. That's why the more you scroll, the more hollow you feel, because your spirit is not hungry for information. It's starving for revelation. And here's the truth the enemy doesn't want you to hear. Negative feelings are not just emotional, they are spiritual barometers. They tell you that something is out of alignment, not because God left you, but because you've been feeding from a table He never prepared. You're drinking from broken cisterns, you're eating dust when He's offering manna, you're living off filters when He wants to give you fire. God says today, I never called you to be a slave to your feelings. I never called you to bow to the weight of this fallen system. I didn't design you for defeat. You were created in my image, filled with my breath, set apart for my glory. But you've got to come out. You've got to unplug from the machine, shut off the noise, turn down the static. Come back to the source. You've been trying to heal your heart with tools that can't even touch your spirit. You've been running on empty, filling your tank with things that evaporate the moment they enter. But there is a fountain. There is a river. There is a fire from the altar of heaven that purges, restores, renews. And it begins when you stop expecting the system to save you. It begins when you say, God, I'm done trusting what's broken. I want you. He never promised the absence of storms, but He promised to be in the fire. He never promised life without tears, but He said He would collect everyone. You were not made to carry sorrow alone. You were not made to bury your grief. You were made to pour it out at the feet of the one who bore your burdens before you ever felt them. He's not afraid of your anger. He's not surprised by your sadness. He's not distant from your despair. He is the God who weeps, who walks, who wars for your soul. So if the system failed good, let it fail. Let the illusion die. Let the false gods fall. Because only when the counterfeit collapses can the true be revealed. And the true is this: Your hope is not in the system, but in the Savior, and He is not far, He is here. And God says today, come to me. You've been taught to follow your feelings, as if they were God's, as if they were truth, as if whatever you feel in the moment must define who you are and what comes next. But that's not what God says. That's what the world says. That's what the flesh says. That's what the enemy whispers when you're weak. But feelings are not the final word. Feelings are not kings. They are not masters. They were never meant to rule over you. And God says today, emotions are messengers, not masters. They're signals, not steering wheels. You don't take commands from your pain. You don't surrender to your sadness. You don't let fear sit on the throne of your decisions. That throne belongs to one alone, Yeshua, Jesus, the King of Kings. The enemy wants your feelings to become your chains. He wants them to wrap around your identity, to weigh down your purpose, to drown out your destiny. If he can get you to feel unworthy long enough, he knows you'll start living like you are. If he can make you feel forgotten, isolated, invisible, he knows you'll stop walking in the authority you've been given. That's the tactic. That's the game. It's not new. It started in the garden when the serpent didn't begin with a sword, he began with a suggestion. A subtle seed of doubt, of shame, of question. Did God really say? And from that question came fear. From that doubt came hiding. And from hiding came a humanity that's been trying to fix itself with fig leaves ever since. But God didn't say follow your feelings. He said follow me. God didn't say be led by your mood. He said be led by the Spirit. And the Spirit of God doesn't move according to your feelings. The Spirit moves according to truth. Truth doesn't change when your emotions do. Truth stands while your storm rages. Truth is the anchor when your soul is tossed. You're not weak because you feel. You were created with emotions, but emotions were never meant to be the engine. They were meant to be the dashboard. When you feel fear, it's not a command to retreat. It's a call to press into trust. When you feel anger, it's not a license to destroy. It's a sign that something needs to be surrendered. When you feel sorrow, it's not a sentence to despair. It's a doorway to healing. But you must learn to bring those feelings to the altar, not let them build altars in your heart. God is not condemning you for feeling. He gave you a heart that feels deeply. He wept, he groaned, he grieved. But he never let those feelings control him. And that's the pattern. Not to suppress, not to pretend, but to submit. Submit every emotion to the one who is Lord over it all. Don't ignore your sadness. Bring it to the cross. Don't deny your anxiety. Lay it down at his feet. Don't run from your grief. Walk through it with the Comforter. There's a lie that says you are what you feel, but that is not the word of God. God says you are what he declares you to be. The feeling says, I'm lost. God says, you are found. The feeling says, I'm broken. God says, you are redeemed. The feeling says, I can't go on. God says, my grace is sufficient. Who will you believe? You see, feelings are real, but they are not always right. They are powerful, but they are not always holy. Some of the greatest regrets in your life came from moments when you followed what you felt instead of standing on what you knew. But God is calling you to maturity, to grow into the kind of faith that can feel one thing and still declare another. The kind of faith that can say, I feel weak, but let the weak say I am strong. The kind of faith that says, though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil. Why? Because you feel brave? No, because he is with you. The victory over negative feelings is not in pretending they don't exist. It's in refusing to let them rule. It's in lifting your hands when your heart is heavy. It's in praising when you feel like shutting down. It's in speaking life when everything around you looks like death. The feelings may come like a flood, but God says, when the enemy comes in like a flood, I will raise a standard against him. The standard is not your mood. The standard is the truth. The standard is the word. The standard is the cross. And God says, today, take your feelings off the throne. You think it's just emotions you're fighting, just some passing wave of anxiety, sadness, rage, confusion, that it's just a bad week, just a low season. No, what you're facing is not simply emotional turbulence. It is a war. It's a spiritual confrontation. And the sooner you see it for what it truly is, the sooner you'll stop trying to fight fire with feathers. You're not just battling a mood. You are standing in the middle of a collision, heaven and hell, light and darkness, truth and deception warring over your mind, your identity, your destiny. This isn't a psychological breakdown. This is a spiritual showdown, and the enemy is banking on the fact that you won't recognize it. He wants you to keep treating spiritual battles with carnal weapons. He wants you to keep trying to medicate what's meant to be confronted, to keep numbing what's meant to be cast out, because if he can convince you it's all in your head, you'll never take up your sword. You'll never engage the battle where it truly rages in the unseen realm. You'll keep thinking it's just stress, just tiredness, just how life is. But God says, no, it's war, and I have not left you defenseless. I have not left you to be devoured by what you were meant to defeat. You've been feeling the pressure, the weight, the chaos, and it's not random. It's targeted. The enemy knows what you carry. He knows what you're destined for, and he fears it. So he throws everything at you, not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous. He wants to keep you distracted, disoriented, deceived, but the time has come to see clearly, to wake up, to realize you don't need more comfort, you need combat. You don't need to run from the fight. You need to step into it fully armed. God never said you wouldn't feel overwhelmed. He never said you wouldn't feel attacked, but he did say, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. He did say, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. He did say, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. But that means you must stand. You must fight. You must see yourself not as a victim of emotions, but as a soldier in the kingdom. When you feel fear, that's not just your nerves. It's the spirit of fear trying to take root. When you feel crushed, that's not just sadness. It's the weight of darkness pressing against the light within you. When your mind is spinning, when you can't sleep, when your peace has vanished, that's not just stress. That's a battlefield. And the war is over your soundness. The enemy knows if he can take your mind, he can silence your voice. And if he can silence your voice, he can disrupt your assignment. But God says today, you have the armor. Put it on, not just the pieces you like, the whole thing, the belt of truth to hold you together when everything's falling apart. The breastplate of righteousness to guard your heart when guilt tries to creep in. The shoes of peace to walk forward when anxiety wants to freeze you in place. The shield of faith to extinguish every lie. The helmet of salvation to cover your mind, to remind you who you are and whose you are. And the sword of the Spirit, the word not just to defend but to strike back. The word is not a comfort quote. It is a weapon, and you must wield it. When the enemy says you are nothing, you declare, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. When he says you are alone, you say, he will never leave me nor forsake me. When he says your story is over, you say, he who began a good work in me will complete it. This is not therapy. This is warfare. This is not about managing your moods. This is about taking territory. There are things in your life that will not move until you confront them. Not with your fists, not with your feelings, but with your faith. There are strongholds that will not break by tears alone, but by truth. There are tormenting thoughts that will not leave by chance. They must be cast out in the name of Jesus. Stop treating your battle like it's a bad day. It's not just a battle over your now, it's over your next. And that next is holy. It's costly. That's why the warfare is fierce. But the enemy has already lost. He's just trying to make sure you don't realize it. He wants to keep you reacting instead of ruling. But God didn't call you to react. He called you to reign. The blood has been shed. The victory has been sealed. Now pick up your sword, lift up your shield, and fight like someone who already won. And God says today, this is not just emotion, it's war. There comes a moment when you have to stop agreeing with the voice of your wounds and start declaring the voice of your God. You've spoken what your pain says, what your past says, what your fear says, but what does God say? Because there is power in the word, but the word doesn't work when it stays closed. It doesn't shake the atmosphere when it sits silent. It must be spoken. And God says today, stop echoing the voice of your emotions. Stop repeating the enemy's script. Stop rehearsing the lies, because the same mouth that's been used to curse yourself is the very instrument heaven wants to use to shift the battle. You've been letting the enemy narrate your story long enough, and every time you say, I can't, I'm not enough, I'm finished, you agree with your chains. But when you begin to speak what God says, your chains begin to break. This is not just about positive thinking. This is about prophetic alignment. This is about heaven invading your language. When God created the universe, He spoke. And you were made in His image. That means your words are not empty. They are creative. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And the enemy knows it. That's why he fights to keep you silent. That's why depression makes you mute. That's why fear chokes your voice, because when you speak in faith, hell trembles. You've got to learn to speak against what you feel. Not ignore it. Confront it with truth. The feeling says, you're broken. You say, by His stripes I am healed. The feeling says, it's hopeless. You say, I know the plans He has for me, plans to prosper me and not to harm me. The feeling says, I'm all alone. You say, even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. There is power in your declaration. The devil isn't afraid of your thoughts, he's afraid of your testimony. And your testimony begins when your words shift from survival to victory. Some of you have been surviving day by day, speaking just enough to get through. But God didn't call you to survive. He called you to speak life, to speak healing, to speak breakthrough before you see it. Remember, God brought Ezekiel into a valley full of bones. Dry, dead, hopeless, and He didn't say, watch me work. He didn't say, just pray quietly. He said, prophecy, speak to the bones. And when Ezekiel opened his mouth in obedience, the bones rattled, shook, and came back together. God didn't need Ezekiel to have power. He just needed him to speak. And what you're facing right now may look like those dry bones, but God says, prophesy to it. Speak to what looks dead. Speak to what seems impossible. Speak until the wind returns, until the breath enters, until what was dry begins to rise. Stop waiting for the atmosphere to shift before you speak. Speak until the atmosphere does shift. Praise before the chains fall. Declare before the healing manifests. Worship before the breakthrough breaks through. That's faith. That's war. That's how walls come down. When Joshua marched around Jericho, nothing moved on day 1. Nothing shifted on day 2. No cracks on day 5. But on the 7th day, when the shout came suddenly, the walls collapsed. You've been walking in circles, waiting for things to change, but maybe heaven is waiting on your voice. Maybe the walls are waiting on your shout, and the shout doesn't come from strength. It comes from obedience, from faith, from knowing that God is not silent, and neither should you be. You've been silenced too long by shame, silenced by grief, silenced by unworthiness, but it's time to take back your voice. not the voice of bitterness, not the voice of defeat, but the voice of a child of the King, a co-heir, a royal priesthood, one who speaks not what is seen, but what is spoken by the throne. Speak healing into your own mind. Speak peace over your own house. Speak joy into the night until the dawn breaks. Speak identity over your life until the labels of the past fall off. Speak purpose. Speak forgiveness. Speak restoration. Speak as one who knows that what God has spoken cannot return void, that His word goes out like a fire, like a hammer, and it accomplishes what it was sent to do. You've echoed the world long enough. Echo heaven now. Say what He says. See what He sees, and speak until every dry place lives again. And God says today your voice is your victory.